So this is a monster. He might look like a cute bundle of fluff, but he's actually a cold bundle of numbers. In video games, numbers are everything. Every character, every object, their position, speed, and even their color is all backed up by numbers. And the cool thing about numbers is that you can double them. Or you can triple them. You can even crank them up far beyond the limits of what any reasonable human player can tolerate. But there is a method to my madness. Let's rewind. Patch Quest is a fusion between roguelike and Metroidvania games. It has a maze-like overworld to explore, and it also has randomized combat encounters. But these genres can be a bit tricky to fuse. For the last few months, I've been really focused on the Vania side of things, adding new zones and new habitats, and linking them together with boss battles and shortcuts. However, the rogue side of things has become a little lost in the process, and it all comes down to the difficulty curve. In a Metroidvania game, the difficulty is based on your current location and on the power-ups that you've unlocked so far. This means that you can get a very jagged difficulty curve that goes up and down, but overall gradually gets harder over the course of about 10 or 20 hours. And to stop this long playtime from getting frustrating, you'll reach plenty of checkpoints along the way. On the other hand, roguelike games relentlessly get harder and harder and harder until you win or lose. There are no checkpoints, it's all or nothing, and you're probably going to end up with nothing. This constantly rising difficulty is what roguelikes are all about. You get stronger, the enemies get stronger, rinse and repeat until the run is over. And so for the past month, I've really been trying to crystallize that roguelike feeling and inject more of it into Patch Quest. So to make the monsters harder to beat, I needed a bunch of new balancing dials. Health and damage modifiers are obvious choices, but in an action game, speed is king. Speed alone can make the difference between mind-numbing boredom and brain-melting insanity. Patch Quest already uses slow-mo effects, and so it was actually pretty simple to add a fast-mo modifier. This dial makes all of a monster's behavior speed up, as if time itself was moving faster. And similarly, I added a fast-mo effect to their bullets. At high difficulty, they really zoom. Then I linked all of these effects to a master dial, the difficulty booster. As this dial gets cranked up, all monster attributes get cranked up as well. But to capture that roguelike feeling, powerful enemies aren't enough. The player has to get much stronger as well. Previously, the player had 5 basic stats, and each stat could be raised 10 times. But I really felt like this wasn't granular enough, and so I changed the cap to 100 points. Now I can dish out these power-ups like candy, and you're still never gonna have too many of them. I also simplified their effects to make the system as intuitive as possible. Riding increases the power of all of your mount's moves, and blasting increases the power of all of your blaster's moves. And on the flip side, blocking increases your HP. You start at 30 points, but with blocking power-ups you can now go all the way to 130 points. And dodging gives you a chance to evade all damage when hit. Finally, affliction makes it easier to inflict ailments on monsters, and it also gives you a chance to avoid getting afflicted yourself. Raising all of your stats will make you a lot more powerful, but the stats by themselves still are not enough to fully capture that roguelike feeling. It's essential to let the player collect different power-ups on different runs, so the battles will play out a little bit differently each time you play. For this reason, I've added 20 new collectible charms, and each one of them gives a unique effect. So Lock-On applies a homing effect to your charge blast, even when you're not using homing ammo. Whereas Auto Melee will automatically melee strike any monster that touches you. There is a lot more charms, but I'll let you discover them yourself. Many of them have stacking synergistic effects, and in the ambush altar rooms you can now tailor your build by selecting from a choice of 3 charms. So taken together, all of these new power-ups can make the player massively more powerful, but it's important to make sure that the player buffs and the monster buffs don't just cancel out. So I made sure that the monster buffs scale up faster than your buffs, and eventually they will outstrip even the strongest players. In previous versions of Patch Quest, if a run lasted for long enough, it would eventually enter night mode, and at night the game would pretty much just try to take you out. I tried a bunch of different variations on this night mode idea, but I never really felt happy with it because the mechanic is just too binary. It does nothing for a really long time, and then it hits you all at once. So I've replaced the night mode with a new mechanic, the sinister wind. Now, each time that you travel maybe 4 or 5 rooms, the sinister wind will blow, and this signals to the player that the difficulty booster is being cranked up by quite a bit. When something changes gradually, it can be difficult to notice that it's changing at all. But the sinister wind creates sudden changes, so you can really feel the game getting harder. If we draw this on a difficulty curve, we get this kind of sawtooth pattern. The player is constantly gathering pickups, making themselves stronger and lowering the game's difficulty. But before too long, the wind will blow and things will kick into the next gear. And eventually, you're going to be taken out and you'll have to return to camp in classic roguelite style. But Patch Quest is also a Metroidvania, and it's important to let players reach distant habitats before the difficulty gets too absurd. And so that's where the doors and shortcuts come in. Each time you unlock a door or a shortcut, it becomes possible to skip a lot of ground on your future runs. And this lets you reach those distant areas before the difficulty has fully ramped up. And therefore, the whole island of Patchlantis can still be explored, even though the game's difficulty is constantly rising. I also managed to squeeze in some work on the corridor generator. I've added 7 new totem types, totems being sculptures that can attack the player. And these totems will now spawn outside of dungeons. I've also added a few new types of pressure plate traps that will trigger when stepped on. And to tie it all together, I've added a handful of new corridor patterns. Patterns are the building blocks that the corridors are built out of, and I've now created 19 of them. So when you put this all together, they contain a lot more dodging and platforming elements than they used to. I'm basically trying to make them feel less like they're just a longer battle room, and more like they're a genuine obstacle course. And this is still a work in progress, but I'm excited about the direction they're moving in, and I'm going to keep adding more patterns as development continues. I've also added a wind effect to the sandstorm region. This wind will blow all shots in a particular direction, so you're going to have to factor that in when you're aiming. And I've buffed the candles in the Misty Caverns area so that they clear a lot more fog when they've been lit. So this makes it a lot easier to see where you're going. And the Zen Zone has also been partially redesigned. This used to be the most linear of the 6 implemented habitats, and so I've just added a couple of extra twists and turns to give the player more freedom. I made a bunch of other small changes as well, but I can't cover every detail in this video. So instead, you can discover them for yourself by playing the Patch Quest Power Surge update, which has already been uploaded to Steam. It contains everything that you've seen in this video, and since the Steam Summer Sale is now live, I've also discounted Patch Quest by 15%. This sale will only last until July 8. The links can be found in the Rinky Dink, and if you already own Patch Quest, then this update is, of course, free. So, if you're a long-time watcher of this devlog series, you're gonna know that I got a bit sidetracked this month. None of these changes were planned, and to be honest, I just got really carried away with a bunch of new ideas. But now that the Power Surge update has launched, I'm putting my full attention into the Jurassic update, which is gonna add the upcoming fossil and volcanic zones. I'll be uploading a bunch of stuff to the game's experimental branch as it's created. You can opt into this branch by fiddling around with the game's properties. I'll also be writing up my daily development progress on the Discord server as usual. If you enjoy this series, please do drop a like. This tricks YouTube into thinking that my videos are actually worth watching, and I'm gonna be back soon with more videos. That's all for now. And as always, thanks for watching.